Blazing Saddle without the volume up is okay for a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
They can't hear all that nasty racist stuff. It's okay.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode 42, brought to you by Cook's Holsters, American-made custom Kydex holsters with a 100% lifetime warranty, a 100% satisfaction guarantee, cooksholsters.com. Got a great show in store for you today. It's been a great week. Had a terrific couple of interviews with my pastor from North Carolina, who's going to be joining us next week in episode 43 to talk about gun-free zones and the Fourth Commandment. We're going to be visiting with shooters for a shooters roundtable to wrap up the 2016 IDPA season in episode 44. Sat down with a great group of people, including Sergeant Bill Silvia. We just had a great time. It was a terrific episode. I really appreciate everybody who participated, and you will enjoy that episode. That's coming up in 2 weeks. As I mentioned last week, Sergeant Bill and Mrs. Sergeant Bill and I all took the Fundamentals of Defensive Focus Shooting class, the one-day class that Aaron Israel teaches out at our home range in Whitewright. I want to thank Mission 160 Tactical for hosting us. I want to thank Aaron for coming out and teaching the course. It was fantastic. It was a really fun day. Enjoyed it a lot, learned a lot about myself and some of the, I think, training scars that I have. I think I've spent a little too much time training for competition and not enough time training for self-defense, and that showed up in the drills that we ran during the day. Something I'm hoping to rectify in the near future. Take some more self-defense classes and get a little better in that respect. Practice and maybe even compete a little bit with my carry gear next year, just to keep up my proficiencies, because it was obvious that a lot of what I was doing and doing wrong was based on things that I had conditioned myself to do in competition. So going to spend a little more time on that. The drills were fun. The other students were great. We had a couple of others who joined us. It was perfect weather. It was the perfect size class, and we burned through a lot of ammo and learned a lot and had a great time. And so thank you to Aaron Israel for doing that, and thank you to Mission 160 for hosting us. And if you have a chance to take one of Aaron's classes, I definitely recommend it. Keep an eye on the website. I will make sure to post any listings of his upcoming classes, and the promo code Lutheran will always be in effect, and you'll get 20% off the tuition of his classes. So stay tuned for that. I'll keep you up to date with any of the classes he has coming up. All right, so let's get to today's show. We've got tips from Mia, we've got tips from Bill, we've got tips from Aaron. Bob Mayne of the Handgun World Podcast is joining us today, so stick around. That's all coming up right here on Armed Lutheran Radio.
Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
With those words, our founding fathers changed the world. They launched an experiment in freedom, where common lawful citizens are free to speak and gather and worship as they choose. But first among those freedoms is the one freedom that makes the rest possible. For 130 years, we've worked to preserve freedom first. I'm Wayne LaPierre of the National Rifle Association.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
You'll probably hear at some point in the gun debate, you certainly will hear from Hillary Clinton, talk of closing the online loophole. And of course, if you know what that really is all about, It's an attempt by the anti-gunners to make those who don't really know anything think that you can buy a gun online from a gun store or a gun dealer and do it without a background check. And we all know that's not possible. What they're really talking about is the sale of private property using an online website to conduct the transaction. And then the transaction, the actual swapping of the goods for the money, happens face-to-face somewhere later that's arranged online. There are a number of websites that do this. You can do this sort of thing on Craigslist. You can do this thing on some different kinds of gun trader websites. If you're going to do this, I wanted to talk about how to do it. I've used these services myself. I've done it recently, and as I was coming back from conducting one of these transfers, I thought I would jot down some ideas and some thoughts about how to do this safely if you're going to do it. First off, there's nothing illegal about this sort of transfer. What we're talking about is the sale of a firearm, the sale of a piece of private property between two private individuals. And the idea that the government should be involved in this is just, that's neither here or there. That's a different discussion for a different day. But I will say this. First point I wanted to make was, if you're going to do this, know the law in your state. Make sure that you're doing however you conduct the transfer, however you conduct the sale, make sure that you're doing it legally. Check your state laws. Some states won't allow this. Some states require background checks on private sales. Some states do not. So make sure that you know the law. I am not going to be giving you any tips or information about how to circumvent the law in your state. Rule number 1 is follow the law. Number 2, whatever you do, I mentioned this service earlier, but don't use it. Craigslist. Stay away from it. Do not use it, particularly for guns. We have a number of examples where these sorts of transactions, and not just the transaction of a gun sale, but any kind of a sale where you go and you meet somebody and you arrange it through Craigslist. We know there are predators. We know there are criminals who troll Craigslist and use that service and arrange meetings with people and then rob them. So do not use Craigslist. That doesn't mean that you can let your guard down using one of these other gun-specific services, one of these gun trading websites. You still have to be very cautious. You can still have people who are members on those sites who try to conduct a sale through that or a purchase through that site who are not reputable and you can't trust. You still have to be cautious. Just because it's gun-specific doesn't mean that it's safe. Number 3, don't put any personal information on your listing. Make sure that when you list the gun, don't give them your name, don't give them your address, do not give them your email address. Give as little personal information about yourself as possible. Be clear about what you will accept or will take in trade. If you're willing to do trades, make sure that you state this. If you don't want to take any trades, make sure you make that very clear, because you will still, even if you don't say, I will accept trades, you will get offers for trades. If you don't want to get the offers for trades for crap, then tell them, I'm not willing to accept trades. And that will save you some headache. This isn't necessarily a safety thing. It will just cut down on the amount of crap you have to sort through to get a decent offer. Be clear about whether or not you will haggle. If what you want is firm, make sure you say $400 firm, $500 firm, whatever. That way you don't have to do a lot of haggling with people. If you are willing to haggle and you are willing to take best offer, before you post, make sure that you have in mind what it is you're willing to come down to if you can't get an offer for the price that you want. Do your due diligence. What I mean by this is make sure that the people, as much as is possible, make sure that the people that you are dealing with are reputable, are good people. Make sure that you're not selling a gun to someone who shouldn't have a gun. What I'm suggesting here is, I'm not saying go out and get a background check. If your state requires it, you absolutely should do that. If your state requires a pistol purchase permit, for example, make sure that the person that you're dealing with has one, and state that in the listing. You must have this, you must have that. In Texas, that none of that is required. But I want to make sure that I'm dealing with good people. I don't want to just sell to anybody. So I make sure that in my listing I will say must have Texas driver's license and license to carry and be willing to sign a firearms bill of sale. If they are not willing to do those things, they probably have something to hide, and you may be dealing with somebody who probably can't get a gun through legal means. I'm just saying, be as safe as you possibly can. And listing it out there, saying you have to have a driver's license, you have to have a license to carry, you have to have or be willing to sign a bill of sale, will deter some people from even trying to bid. Now, you can't know for certain that they're telling the truth, but at least it will narrow things down and hopefully dissuade some people from even trying to bid. Make sure you list out exactly what it is you expect of the people that you're going to sell to. If you're willing to sell to just anybody, then don't do it. Then it doesn't matter. But that's not a chance that I would recommend you take. And yes, these people can lie, and yes, they can say, I've got a driver's license. Yes, I've got a CHL or a license to carry. Yes, I will sign a bill of sale, and they may renege on all of that, or they may be lying. But at least up front, if you state what your expectations are, I would say the majority of people are going to completely ignore your listing if they don't fit those requirements, and if you state very clearly what those requirements are. The money that you're going to make from the sale isn't worth the risk, in my opinion. And so I don't even take that chance. All right. So once you've connected with somebody and they've made you an offer and you've agreed, yep, I'll sell the gun to you. Now you've got to decide how you're going to face-to-face make the transaction. And you've got to come up with a place to meet them. So recommendation point number 7 is never, ever meet at your house or your place of work. The majority of these people will likely be good people, but you still don't want to take that chance. You don't know until you meet them face to face what kind of a person you're dealing with. So you certainly don't want them rolling up into your driveway or knowing where you work. So absolutely do not let them know that. Do not meet at your home or your place of work, and do not meet at their home either. Point number 8 would be don't meet somewhere that you're not familiar with. Put in your listing, willing to meet in these areas, and don't be specific, but kind of general areas. I will meet in the area of this mall, or in the area of this intersection, or this part of town, or this part of town. But don't get specific. And don't make it right down the street from your house either. Make sure it's somewhere that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with, so that you know how to get in and out of the place. You know the roads in and out. You know how to get away if you had to. You know how to get back home or back to work easily. Take somebody with you. Point number 9, take somebody with you to conduct the transaction. Bring a friend. That way you're safe. You have somebody to sort of watch your back, because you really don't know what you're getting into when you get there. You might pull up and that person has 4 or 5 people with them, and then it gets kind of dicey. You just don't know. Point number 10 is to meet somewhere that's busy. And I don't mean to pull right up in front of a store where everybody can see that you're handling a gun and you're conducting a gun sale. But the parking lot of a busy shopping center or a restaurant or a store, not right up at the front door necessarily, but close enough where if something goes wrong, you can call for help and someone could hear you, or someone might see if something bad happens. You want witnesses. They probably will not even notice the transaction. You want to be far enough that they don't even notice, don't even care that you're out there in the parking lot. But if something goes wrong and you yell for help, you'll have people close by that could hear you and render assistance, call the police, or come to your aid, or at the very least be good witnesses. Make sure you get there early. That's the other thing. When you set a time and you say, okay, I'll meet you at 5 o'clock, make sure you're there 15 to 20 minutes early so you can sort of stake out a place to park and to meet. And make sure that you park in a place and in a way where you can easily pull away quickly. I would recommend also meeting during the day. Nighttime, not a good situation, potentially dangerous. Darkness lends itself to being surprised and running into problems, and other people not being able to see you if there is an issue and if they need to come to your aid, or they need to be a good witness. If they can't see, they'll tell the police, I really couldn't tell because it was dark. I would do it somewhere well lit, preferably during the day. And the last point that I wanted to make was probably the most important, and that was trust your gut. If your gut, if your intuition says to you something's not right, drive away. The money that you might get from that sale is not worth the risk of your life, because we do know there are predators out there. We do know that there are people who are looking to take advantage of people who conduct online sales, but if he won't give you his name or he won't tell you the description of the vehicle that he's driving, those kinds of things, then I would back out completely and I would not even go. Trust your gut, know where you're going to be meeting, make sure it's somewhere you're familiar with, make sure it's not close to where you live, it's certainly not at your place of work or your home. Don't meet them at their home, and make sure that it's well lit, fairly well traveled so that there are people fairly close by in case you need help. And if it doesn't feel right, don't go through with it. There's no reason for you to risk your life simply to sell a firearm. So I hope you found these tips helpful. I hope the next time that you decide to sell a firearm online, you will keep these tips in mind, and I hope you will stay safe.
Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Silvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today we're going to talk about helping your team. Now we're going to talk about helping your team from a squad perspective while shooting IDPA match or a USPSA match or something like that. But I think these ideas can translate to any team or family or group of shooters that you shoot with. Now, in most matches, I noticed that most squads and the shooters, they don't help each other. They tend to kind of stand around and watch everybody shoot and wait for their turn, and that's about it. I think it's mostly because people don't want to give unsolicited advice, or whatever it may be. But I really think that if you're shooting with people you know and you're there to have fun and do well, you can help each other and do a lot better and have a lot more fun. So what I'm going to start doing when I shoot in different squads, whether it be a club level match or even a sanctioned match, first I'm going to make sure I shoot with people that I know and I like and have a good time with. And even if there's a few people that I don't know, I'm going to try to involve them and include them in this. So at the beginning of each stage, you get a walkthrough, or the squad gets to walk through the stage and look at all the different positions or whatever it may be, and figure out how you're going to do it and what you're going to do. What I want to start doing is asking everybody I shoot with, hey, got any ideas for this? Any tactics? Confer with your squad mates before we all shoot. Kind of pull your ideas. I know personally I'd appreciate any help. I know I want to do well, and I want my squad mates to do well and succeed. And in doing all that, the better we do, the more fun we have. I shot a sanctioned IDPA match last weekend with some really good shooters, some fun guys, and it's amazing to me how many different ways we all had for shooting the different stages. Now, some of that's based on skill level, but some of it's not, and I think in retrospect, if we had from the get-go been helping each other from the start, we all would have done a little bit better. We may have eliminated some mistakes or traps that some of us may have fallen into, and we would have had more fun. And always remember, when you're doing this, be encouraging and positive. Nobody likes shooting with that negative guy. Nobody wants to hang around them and spend the day shooting with them, that wants to snap at you because they're trying to get ready for their stage, or they just don't want to take advice. Well, make a mental note of that, leave that guy alone, and make sure he doesn't squad with you next time. I like to think of it this way. Competitive shooting is a lot of fun, but sometimes some guys forget about the fun part of it. They just focus on the competition part. They want to do as well as they can, and they get very serious. Well, it's serious fun, but it still has to be fun. If it's not fun, why the heck are you out there doing it? This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.
Sergeant Bill Silvia is a 15-year veteran of the Dallas Police Department and master class competitive shooter. You can watch Sergeant Bill's shooting videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill.
Over and above our own body, spouse, and temporal possessions, we have another treasure: honor and a good reputation. If you're forced to use your firearm in self-defense, it's very likely that you will have to fight to clear your name after the fight for your life is over. Do you have $10,000 on hand to retain an attorney? Have you got cash readily available to make bail so that you don't have to sit in a jail cell somewhere while your family and friends are trying to scrape together enough cash money to get you out? Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network can give you peace of mind knowing that you have the financial and legal assistance to face this new threat to your liberty, your property, and your good name. Become a member today for just $135 a year by visiting armedcitizensnetwork.com and using the tracking code 15625 or Paul Lathrop, that's LATHROP, when you sign up. Can you survive the legal aftermath of self-defense? Join Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network today. armedcitizensnetwork.com. Use the tracking code 15625 or Paul Lathrop.
Where gun culture meets the gospel. This is Armed Lutheran Radio. It's time for this week's self-defense tip from Aaron Israel of Fundamental Defense.
Hey folks, this is Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense, here with your personal defense tip of the week. This week I want to debrief a story from Indianapolis where an armed citizen got involved in a robbery, and I want to talk about things we can learn from it and things we can do better as armed citizens. So reading directly from that story from Indianapolis, police have arrested 5 teenagers who are suspected in nearly a dozen robberies in central Indiana. Antonio Cowherd and Michael Kendrick, both 19 years old, along with 3 other juveniles, are in custody for robbery charges. Police say 3 of the suspects held up a Burger King restaurant in the 5100 block of West Washington Street around 9 p.m. on Wednesday. The teenagers walked into the restaurant with guns, but a firearms instructor who had just left the restaurant with his food saw the suspects putting on masks and going inside, so he followed them. That customer, who's licensed to carry a firearm, ordered the teens to drop their weapons, but they instead turned and pointed their guns in his direction. That man fired to defend himself, and a gunfight ensued. No one was hurt in the shooting, and the suspects fled in an SUV and were captured later by police. So what can we learn from this situation? Well, first off, we know the guy's walking outside of the Burger King. We don't know if he got back to his car or if he had just walked past the 3 guys as they're putting their masks on or what the real standoff was, but he's already left the restaurant. So he's outside of the venue. He's no longer in the line of attack. He's no longer a part of that situation. So if he's got that standoff, if he's outside the building and the only thing that he sees happening is a robbery about to take place, there's nothing about a robbery as far as me not being in the situation and me seeing it happen. I don't care about that petty cash inside of that drawer. Now, could you make the case that he was trying to defend the life of the cashier or the employees? You could make that stretch, but really you know it's about to be a robbery and you know that they're after the money that's inside there. So I'm not going to put myself in harm's way to protect the petty cash at a Burger King. What I'm going to do if I've got that standoff, if I'm already outside the building, is I'm calling the cops. I'm going to be a good witness and I'm going to let the cops come and deal with that. And pretty quick response time. If you're in the public space at a Burger King, they can probably be there within 5 minutes. Let them deal with the robbery. They get paid to do that, and they're going to show up with more than just one guy, more than likely, especially if you give them the information that there's 3 people robbing the store. But definitely don't put yourself in danger, especially if you're already outside the restaurant. Second off, he's already outside the restaurant, and he sees that there's 3 of them and 1 of him. So he knows that he's outnumbered if he gets involved in this situation. So play your odds the right way. If it's 3-1 that you know of, why would you put yourself in that situation over the petty cash inside of a Burger King? I'm not going to do it. There's simply nothing compelling about preventing a robbery that I'm going to go 3 against 1 and try to save the day and be a hero. And this guy was a licensed to carry instructor, apparently. Now, I don't know what the standard is for licensed to carry instructors in Indiana, but this ought to tell you that just because you have some instructor credential doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make the most optimal decisions. You need to get that further training, because if he'd come through some of the classes that I've been through and that I teach, he would know that that's not a good idea to go in there and try to save the day 1 against 3. Not only only that, we know from the report here that there were more than 3 guys that were involved in this because they arrested several more later on down the road that were involved in this robbery as well. So for all he knows, he could have gone in there and not only had to face the 3 that were in there, but they're also their buddies that were waiting outside. And that's always a risk that you're taking when you get involved in these things, when they don't develop and force you to get involved in them. When you make that decision to get involved on behalf of that third person, protecting that cash register, and you already know it's 3 against 1, well, it could have been 5 or 6 against 1, according to the story. So you're already making a lot of bad decisions there and putting yourself in unnecessary risk for things that are not worth dying for. So when you think about getting involved in a situation, my advice to you is, if you are not directly put in danger, do not put yourself in danger unless you have a very compelling reason to do so. And the cash inside the register at a Burger King when it's 3 versus 1 is not a good situation to put yourself in. That is not a good bet. That is not a solid play for you as an armed citizen. So make better decisions and look at these situations and Monday morning quarterback them and say, what could I have done better? Now, I hope this guy learned something from this situation. I'm glad he walked away unscathed, and honestly, I'm glad the criminals walked away unscathed too. Nobody was hurt. That's great. I don't know how many bullets were fired, but hopefully he takes his practice on the range more seriously so he can get these hits, and hopefully he learns something about getting involved in these situations, because just because you point a gun at somebody and tell them to get on the ground doesn't mean they're going to comply, and when they don't comply, I hope you've thought out your whole plan about what you're going to do. Was this guy behind cover? Did he have a position of advantage if they refuse to get on the ground? We don't know all of those things. I'd love to debrief the guy. But bottom line, don't get involved in these things unless you have a very compelling reason to do so, and especially don't do it when you know you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. That's your personal defense tip of the week. Thanks for tuning in.
Aaron Israel is a Personal Defense Network contributor and owner of Fundamental Defense. You can find out more and sign up for any of Aaron's classes at fundamentaldefense.com.
If you carry a gun for personal protection, it's imperative that you get a good holster. When I started out, I had no idea what that meant, and I went through a bunch of really bad holsters. Then I found Cook's Holsters at cooksholsters.com. Cook's Holsters are custom made to fit your specific firearm. Available in lots of colors, including custom printed Kydex. Cook's Holsters are made in the USA and the great state of Georgia and come with a lifetime warranty against defects and a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Visit www.cooksholsters.com and use the promo code ARMEDPODCAST and get a 15% discount off everything in the store. You put a lot of time and money into the firearm you choose to carry for personal protection. Carry it in the best holster. cooksholsters.com.
Your support is vital to this Christian-centered pro-gun ministry. Help support Armed Lutheran Radio by visiting patreon.com/Armed Lutheran and become a sponsor today. Up next, it's Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstine.
Hi everybody, I am happy you made it to another week and that you're here sharing it with all of us. I am here at Armed Lutheran Radio because I like inspiring others, be it shooting guns for fun, competition, or to put food on the table. I am not much of a competitor, but my daughter does partake in shooting sports. This week, her team, Los Gatos Negros, took first place in their Fall League Series at Trap League. Her team is comprised of 5 members. She is the youngest, and she is the only girl on the team. It is inspiring to see the captain, Jimmy, a man who's not quite of retirement age yet, put together a team where he can mentor and inspire youngsters to take up shooting. The other 3 members of the team include a gentleman who's nearly Jimmy's age, a man who is probably a youngster like me, and then another boy who is near Leah's age. You see, there's a whole gamut of generations out there, and they all come together to shoot guns. That leads me to a conversation that I had last week at our church's book club meeting. A couple of the parents asked a really common question, and that is, what age should I teach my children to shoot? I can share both from my experience as a shooter as well as my experience from a shooting instructor as to when to teach the children. In my experience as a shooting instructor, I most often, along with my husband, teach children safety, and then we teach them how to shoot. Let me tell you some of my thoughts and my experiences on the matter of what age it should be that kids learn to use guns. Well, I have a question for you. At what age did you learn to shoot? I learned to shoot at 5 years old. Is this an appropriate age? I have to direct the question back to the parents because the parents know their children, they know their capabilities and how mature they are better than anyone else. Do you think they're old enough to begin handling a firearm? When I learned to shoot, it was because my dad wanted to make sure my brother and I were safe. My brother was 10, and he and my dad were beginning to hunt together, and my dad wanted both of us to know that guns are not toys. Was I of age to go hunting? According to some state laws, no, but that's not what the shooting lesson was about at all. It was about safety. He wanted to make sure his family was safe, and he knew that I would see my brother with a gun, and he had to eliminate my lack of knowledge in order to get a jump on any curiosity. One thing I want to send home to you in deciding when to teach a child about firearms is safety. It is the highest priority. Next, there are a few things that a parent, or hopefully both parents, should be asking themselves. One is, how mature is your child? Is your child attentive? Does your child follow rules and show signs of respect? You have guns in the house. Are they locked up? If you need trigger locks or other means of safely storing your firearms, you can always look to National Shooting Sports Foundation's Project Child Safe program for help. Never rely on a hiding spot for your gun. And I say this because what game did you first learn to play? Yep, it was hide and seek. Do you think your children aren't going to be good at that game? Another question that you should be asking yourself is, what is my child going to do if they're at a friend's house and they come across a gun? This is where you should keep in mind NRA's Eddie Eagle program. If you would like information about it, you can find it on their website or look to the mercantile page of my website at miaanstine.com. This program teaches children not about handling, but it teaches them what to do if they spot another gun, so they can run and tell you that there's a firearm, and hopefully they won't pick it up and try to play with it. So, once you have made up your mind to get them to the range for live fire, please remember to focus on safety. And I will tell you, I have turned down a child or two who I simply deemed not ready to learn to handle the firearm. Safe shooting out there. Until next week, bye.
You can read more from Mia and watch her YouTube videos at miaanstine.com.
It's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. I'm Alan Gottlieb, founder of the Second Amendment Foundation. When someone says we don't need that kind of gun, remind them the Founding Fathers determined what rights our Constitution should protect. There's a world of difference between rights and needs. It is not the function of government to tell us what we need or what we don't. Certainly no one needs an assault rifle or a Saturday night special, or for that matter, no one needs a Corvette with a high-capacity horsepower engine capable of speeds to 150 miles per hour. But in the hands of honest, responsible individuals, we have the right of choice. We have the right to read books others don't like. We have the right to listen to any radio program we choose. We have the right to dress the way we want to. We also have the right to own firearms of our choice. So the next time someone tells you, you don't need something, tell them it's the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Needs. Join the Second Amendment Foundation today so that this message and our Bill of Rights might live. Call 425-454-7012. That's 425-454-7012.
Welcome back to Armed Lutheran Radio. Our guest today is host of the long-running Handgun World Podcast. He carries a gun because he can't carry a cop. Bob Mayne, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio.
Well, thanks for having me, Lloyd. It's good to be here.
I appreciate you taking the time. It's an honor to have you on the show. I'm a big fan of the podcast. Your trek to Texas sounds a little bit like mine. I was listening to something you were telling the other day, and you were born in New York. Is that correct?
I was born in New York City.
As was I. You grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up in North Carolina, and now we're both in Texas. How did that happen?
Well, My mom got me out of New York City when I was pretty young. I was about 2.5 years old. So I got no memories of growing up in Manhattan. And she met a guy from Wisconsin and, decided to get married. And then that's how we got to Wisconsin.
Funny how love works like
that.
Yeah,
and then, I grew up in Wisconsin, went to high school and college in Wisconsin, and then decided I had enough of the cold weather, so decided to go south.
That'll do it.
That did it, yeah. And then, the funny thing is, Lloyd, I think I've said this on my podcast once before. I grew up in one of the coldest states in the country, and so I had enough of it, so I moved to one of the hottest. I went to Arizona.
So you moved to Texas to cool off?
Yeah, I moved to Texas to cool off from Arizona, yes. Yeah, it's weird. Long story. We don't have enough time for that story.
Maybe we'll do that in a part 2.
Some other day, yes.
Well, we heard Rob Morse's story back in episode 40. Lots of people have similar stories about how they got started with guns. And so how does a guy from 2 of the most liberal anti-gun states in the nation become a gun guy?
Actually, Wisconsin's not too much anti-gun anymore. They've changed. But
very true.
To answer your question, in 2005, when we were living not too far from you, the Dallas-Fort Worth area,
mm-hmm.
I had to take a business trip to Houston. So I drove to Houston, and I got in real late. I got in pretty close to midnight. And I can't remember why, but I checked into my hotel room and I decided I needed to go to Walmart to get something. I don't remember why I was going to Walmart. So I go to a Houston Walmart. It's after midnight.
Oh, God.
Yeah, bad idea. Houston Walmart after midnight, What's the old saying? Don't do stupid things in stupid places at stupid times.
With stupid people, right.
With stupid people, yes. And so what do? I go to Walmart at a little past midnight. I buy my stuff and I walk outside of Walmart and I start walking back towards my car. And when I got about 20 feet outside the Walmart, some guy came up to me, and this guy was pretty unsightly. He looked to me very quickly that he was high on something or really drunk, and he kind of came up to me kind of in a calm manner at first, which that's how they interview, That's what they do. And he was asking for directions. He didn't ask for money. He was asking for directions. And my instincts told me not to stop, just keep on walking.
Right.
So I ignored him, and I kept on walking, and he started following me. And he got up to my side again, and he started saying, "Hey, man, I need some directions, man. I need some directions." And I said, "I don't think I can help you." And I kept on walking. Well, 2 seconds later, he's grabbing my left shoulder,
Ooh.
and he's pulling me back and spinning me around. And as soon as I flipped around, I saw his right hand in the pocket of his baggy jeans.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And of course, I wasn't a gun guy then, so I wasn't really. I knew something was up,
mm-hmm.
but I thought, "Oh crap!" So I just started dashing. I started sprinting towards my car. I was at this point, still about 20 to 25 yards from my car.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Well, on the way to my car, the Walmart security guard shows up in a golf cart, and he says, "Is there a problem?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and the guy that spun me around, he sees the Walmart security guard and he takes off running. He's gone. And to this day, I have no idea what his hand was on inside of his pocket. I don't know if it was a pocket pistol. I don't know if it was a knife. I don't know if his hand was cold or what. But I'll never know. So the long story being short, Lloyd, the next day I decided I'm going to get my concealed handgun license. And that's how I became a gun guy.
We hear so many stories like that.
Yep.
And that's amazing. So you're a salesman by trade, right?
I am.
And
I am.
That's the one thing I have to admit I always liked about your podcast, that you're the practical guy. You're just, you're sharing your every guy knowledge with everybody else about guns and things. And, I don't discount information that you hear from experts, although, if you see a gun review in a magazine, sometimes you got to wonder about the advertising, how that affects things. But I commuted a lot back in North Carolina, about an hour and a half a day one way to work. So I listened to your show, and so I felt like Your show was something I could sort of relate to. You're not the professional gun guy. You're not the tactical Timmy. You're the everyman, the practical guy in his mobile studio. Well, you started, 7 years ago?
Yeah, I started in August of 2009.
What made you decide to start podcasting?
Well, that's another great question. I don't get asked these very often. A friend of mine said to me, he said, I know now you like to conceal carry and you like guns. You ought to start listening to some of the gun podcasts because there's some good information out there. And I thought, what's a gun podcast? I didn't know what a podcast was. I didn't know what a podcast was 2 months before I started podcast. And so he told me what a podcast was, how to use my smartphone that I had at that time to listen to stuff for free on the internet. I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So I started listening to some podcasts. And Jack Spirko from the Survival Podcast motivated me because he was podcasting from his car. And, he was to and from work. He was podcasting from his car. And I listened to him for a couple months. I listened to a couple of other podcasts. I can't even remember. They were firearms related. And I just decided one day, hey, I think I can do this. So I decided to try it.
So you wrote up some notes, taped them to your dash, and off you went.
You remember that, don't you?
I do remember that.
I didn't even know what I wanted to talk about, but I figured, you know what? People are either going to hate what I have to say, or they might like it, and I might get half a dozen listeners. And literally, I'm serious. I'm thinking, hey, you know what? If I can get a half a dozen listeners, maybe after doing this a few times, I'll consider it a success. So I literally got out a piece of paper and a pen, and I just started writing down some notes that I was thinking about. I had been carrying now for about 4 years at that point, and competition shooting and everything. And I started writing down some notes, and if you go back and listen to episode 1, it's awful.
Ken Blanchard shares a similar story. He doesn't even let you hear. You can't even go back that far on his podcast. He said they're so bad.
Well, you can on mine. You can go to handgunworld.com and you have to listen off the website. But you can go back to episode 1. I think it's hideous. But after about the third episode, I think it was third or fourth episode, I actually got a comment. And I don't even know how people found my podcast. I don't know. I mean, I submitted it to iTunes, and I started getting on some forums and talking about, some of the stuff that I was doing. And maybe that's how people started finding me, as I started going on gun forums. And I actually started getting comments, and one guy actually sent me an email. I wish I had saved the email. He said, hey, you're doing a pretty good job. I kind of like it. And I thought, really? You kind of like? Okay, well, good. Maybe I'll keep doing this.
Print that and frame it.
Yeah, print that. I wish I had. I was using a different email client by then, so it's long gone. But that's how it started.
Oh, very cool. So now, though, you're smarter than the average bear now. You've gone out. You've gotten all kinds of training. You've become an instructor yourself. Tell us a little bit of how that came about. How did you decide you wanted to start training other people?
You see, in most of what I've done, it was never planned to come about. How did that come about? Well, I was at a place that you probably know. I was at the Dallas Pistol Club, and I was shooting a competition match. Have you shot there?
I have not been to the Pistol Club for a match.
Oh, okay. I was shooting a match at the Dallas Pistol Club, and one of the other competitors said, "Hey, I think I can bring a kind of a big name instructor into town. Do you think you'd be interested in taking a training class?" And I said, "Sure." So the person he was bringing in was John Payne from Suarez International, and so I thought, yeah, I could probably use some training because all I had was some competition instruction, and this was a defensive class.
Right.
So I took the class, and I thought, oh, this is great stuff. And I took another class, and I thought, this is great stuff. And I took another class, and I thought, this is really great stuff.
So you caught the bug.
So I caught the bug, but I still didn't see myself instructing. Well, fast forward a while, after I had taken about a half a dozen training classes, I got a new job, moved to San Antonio, and I started shooting IDPA in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. And at an IDPA match in Austin, Texas, this guy named Ben Branham came up to me. And he said, "Are you Bob Mayne from the Handgun World Podcast?" I said, "Yeah, that's me." He said, "I've been listening to your show. I really like it." And I thought, "Oh, well, thank you very much." And we just started chit-chatting, and I got to know Ben. And a few weeks later, Ben said to me, "What do you think about doing some training and doing some instructing and teaching some classes. And so that's how that started.
Very cool. That was actually my next question. I was gonna ask how you teamed up with Ben. Very cool. So what kind of courses do you and Ben teach?
Our signature class is Beyond Concealed Carry. And what that is that's kind of an intermediate class. And we called it that because it's the next step beyond your concealed carry license. Mm-hmm. You know, we both knew that, and pretty much half the world knows, that concealed carry license is not training.
No.
You know, so we figured that people needed to know something besides what they learned at that time it was an 8-hour class.
Right.
In Texas.
Yep.
So what we teach is an intermediate level. We teach you the next step, how to get the gun safely out of your holster and put 2 to 3 hits on target quickly, how to clear malfunctions, how to perform efficient, defensive-minded, tactical reloads that make sense in the real world. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we teach you things like how to move and shoot properly. Now, if you're a competitive shooter, you learn how to move and shoot. But a lot of people are not competitive shooters.
Well, I'm a competitive shooter, and I stink at moving and shooting.
Most people do. Ben and I get you to perfect. And even if you take a one-day class, by the end of the first day, you'll be doing well from 5 to 7 yards moving and shooting.
Awesome.
Because you shouldn't be standing still in a gunfight. You're a fool if you do.
Absolutely.
And we teach, we teach things like if you take some of the 2-day classes, how to engage multiple threats, how to shoot one-handed with your right and your left hand.
Another of my weaknesses.
Yeah, I was shooting a competition match a couple months ago, and one of the stages had to be all left-handed. And of course, I'm a right-hander, and I did better with my left hand than I did with my right hand. And the safety officer asked. He asked me. He said, "How come you?" He said, "You shot that better than with your right-handed only." I said, "I practice it." And he kind of looked at me like I had 6 heads. When I told him I practiced shooting left-handed.
Yeah, you can't neglect it. You got to spend. It's like Sergeant Bill, who does the Ballistic Minute tips on our show. One of his tips was practice what you don't do well. Right? It's easy to go to the range and you practice the stuff that you can do well, and you come home feeling good about yourself. But you really have to practice the stuff that you stink at.
Yeah, I heard that segment that Sergeant Bill did, and it's very true. And I am not very good shooting with my left hand because I'm a right-hander, so I've practiced it a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what Ben and I teach. That's what Beyond Concealed Carry is. It's kind of an intermediate level. We do teach some advanced stuff, Beyond Concealed Carry Advanced, we call it, where we'll have you doing things like shooting from laying on the ground while you're sitting, laying down, prone, one-handed, all kinds of stuff, like even shooting hostage takers and everything.
Now you've got a pretty busy schedule with these classes coming up. Starting in January, right?
Yeah, starting January 21st in our hometown of San Antonio.
Well, I'm hoping to be there. Where else are you teaching, and which one are you teaching in January?
Well, so I don't screw this up, let me go to my website. And pull up my training classes calendar. All right. By the way, you can find all this at handgunworld.com and go to the training classes page. San Antonio, January 21st. Mm-hmm. That's a one-day. By the way, that's kind of a new class we now teach called The Art of the First Hit. And we teach a little bit of that nasty word called point shooting in there. And, a lot of people think that should never be taught and is not viable. And we vehemently disagree, and we teach people how to do it and do it very well.
Right. And you were talking in the last podcast about how so often you don't have time to press out and actually use your sights. You're shooting, from retention or somewhere between full extension and compressed ready. So, that sounds like a fantastic class.
There are times not only will you not have time to go to full extension, but you shouldn't.
Right.
And I won't give too much away, but we teach in that class why you shouldn't always extend that gun all the way out to the end of your arms, and sometimes you can't use your sights. We'll teach you how to. The last time we taught one of these classes, we had students making nice hits without a full sight picture from 7 yards, and they were shocked.
So that's what you're going to be teaching in January?
Yeah, January 21.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that's not really it's an intermediate class, so you don't have to have a prerequisite. We're going to Dallas in April.
Oh.
Yeah, we're going to be in Argyle, Texas, at Quail Creek Range.
Very good. It's right down the road from me.
Not too far from you, yeah. And that's our 2-day Beyond Concealed Carry class.
I'll be there for that then.
Yeah, that's a 2-day Beyond Concealed Carry. We might be in Houston in February, but we're trying to firm that up, so I can't confirm that yet.
Okay.
We're going to be in Utah in May. Jason Christensen from Concealment Solutions is our sponsor and our host for that class.
Right. Great guy.
Good guy. Phenomenal guy. May 19th and 20th, we'll be in Utah. We're going to Northern Illinois in June.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to right near the Wisconsin-Illinois border, and Gary Doherty from Firearm Safety Institute's our host there.
Very good.
Yeah, so if you have any Illinois, Wisconsin listeners, we're coming your way the end of June.
All right.
And then we've got 2 August classes in South Dakota and Ohio.
All right.
That's what we got so far.
Good deal. That sounds like a lot, actually. That's a lot of traveling.
We may put a few more in there. I took this year off from a lot of traveling. I took 2016 off. So I'm going to get out on the road a little bit more next year.
Well, you had a lot going on.
I still do, but
yeah.
But this is kind of like my escape. It's the only method I have to kind of escape some of the challenges once in a while, and everybody has to have an escape.
Yep, absolutely. You and Paul Lathrop, you are co-founders of the Self-Defense Radio Network, and I'm honored to be a member. Tell us a little bit about how you two came up with this idea and what the objective for SDRN is.
I'll give credit where it's due. It was Paul Lathrop's idea, and I decided to join with him and kind of form a joint venture because two heads, 2 efforts, and 2 popular podcasts are usually better than one to launch something like this.
Right.
And Paul agreed, so we decided to form the joint venture, and our goal is to bring podcasters together like yourself and 10 other podcasts that have a passion for self-defense and even a little bit of prepping, and kind of generate some synergy between the podcasts. We've got the listener in mind. We have some good benefits for the listeners that listen to Self-Defense Radio Network podcasts. I'll be announcing it actually on my show that's releasing this Sunday. Some pretty cool stuff that we're going to be giving away to network listeners, and how you can win some of that stuff. And we also are offering some other pretty good incentives coming up that we'll probably announce either in December or January that'll be pretty cool. So the listeners are first at the Self-Defense Radio Network, and we also think that all the podcasts are going to start to grow pretty well too, so that's a big benefit.
Bob Mayne is the host of the Handgun World Podcast, co-founder of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check him out at selfdefenseradio.net and handgunworld.com. Bob, Christ's blessings to you and your family. Continued success with the podcast, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you. Amen. Thanks for having me come.
And that's going to wrap it up for another episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. Thank you all for listening, downloading, and subscribing. Big thank you goes out to my contributors, Mia Anstine, Aaron Israel, Sergeant Bill Silvia, and a special thank you to our guest today, Bob Mayne of the Handgun World Podcast. Check him out at handgunworld.com or at the Self-Defense Radio Network, selfdefenseradio.net. Thank you all again for joining us. Until next week, keep shooting, keep praying. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and TuneIn. This podcast is made possible by Cook's Holsters and contributions from listeners like you.